What's up, everyone? This is the Nuts and Bolts Podcast, and I'm your host, the one James, here with our amazing co-host, Airball.
Hey, guys.
And Michael Kritz.
What it do?
And we're here to give you the nuts and bolts of the standard and pioneer formats each and every week. A little bit of historic brawl today. But first, let me talk to you about the sponsor of the podcast, CoolStuffInc.com. Using code James5, you can save 5% off of anything in the store, sealed products, singles, anything you could ever need in Magic the Gathering and every other card game for that matter. They have it. Go save yourself some hard-earned money and go to CoolStuffInc.com today. Let's go to the upkeep. We're going to start off with the jargon. We have two jargons today because we have two different types of cards in this Explorer Anthology that we're going to be talking about today. Broken and Chaff. Broken is a card that's overly powerful, usually a card that you can't afford to play without if you're playing in those colors. When a card's officially broken is of some debate within the Magic community. Players frequently declare cards they hate to be broken, even if they're not. Likewise, it's a term that's frequently used sarcastically, like something, something's broken, even though it's not really broken or breaking the game. The other one is Chaff, is unremarkable or worthless cards. Rubbish cards not worthy to be a part of a constructed deck. Very often used in the context of quote-unquote draft chaff, where the 42 to 45 card pool has its useful cards stripped and the remainder left behind. When someone talks about chaff, they literally is just like, this is a junk common or uncommon that no one should ever play. Why are they playing this? Like some random 3-mana enchantment removal spell that was only designed for draft. People call it chaff, but sometimes they're really good if you're playing an enchantment deck. Anyways, we're going to talk about basically what's broken and what's chaff today. Let's go to Airball and Michael Kritz to see what they feel is the difference between something broken, maybe sarcastically, and something that's chaff, maybe in the new cards that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, kind of like what you said. Broken is in the eye of the beholder. For me, for a lot of players, broken just means not chaff and swings the game when it enters the battlefield, which to me just means constructed playable. So I think a lot of people will have a disagreement about what's broken and what isn't.
I agree. And that's exactly, not to mirror you two, so just to be off that path. Things that you can consider broken are things like, Omnath or companion cards or Oko. Those things fundamentally broke the game of Magic and had to be banned. So you can say those things would be accurate to say broken. Now, Cauldron Familiar, not broken. They, free Cauldron Familiar, okay? Justice for Cauldron Familiar. That's what I'm talking about. That card was not broken. People just felt bad. And then Chaff is, draft chaff, that's totally a thing. I'm a little goblin that takes all the draft chaff and then I flip it. So, keep leaving your draft chaff out. Sometimes, there's, a card that is good in some sort of format that people think it's good, and I flip them.
I mean, speaking of chaff, I was one of the people that thought Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven were both chaff. And then I lost to it, and I was like, what? I lost to some random deck using draft cards. The first time I ever played against Cat Oven, I was like, that cannot be a deck.
I knew it was so good to start off. I started my career as Magic as a sacrifice player, and I was like, wait a minute. Oven? Cat? This is great. I knew from the rip that thing was gonna be popping.
Yeah, I didn't think about the Trail of Crumbs with the Mayhem Devil and all that kind of stuff to begin with. So yeah, I thought it was chaff, as I must say. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the main phase. We're talking about Explorer Anthology 2. There's 25 total cards, and we're going to go over those today. Some of them might be broken, spoiler alert, and some of them are just chaff. Let's start out with the first one. It's Mana Confluence. Mana Confluence is a card that is very powerful. You can tap it to pay a life and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, but the problem is you have to pay a life, and in a constructed format where aggro decks exist, you don't want to have too many of these in your deck. And you only really want to have it if your mana's super bad. Maybe if it's like a 4 or 5 mana deck. The only deck I've seen this in constructed is 5-color Enigmatic Fires. And then the rest of the decks that play Mana Confluence are just commander decks or historic brawl decks.
I mean, I've seen it in actual Pioneer. People play Mana Confluence. especially when they're trying to do like 3-color things or like uncertain about how to initially build their mana bases. You kind of sometimes see mana confluence, but it's something that we spoke on another episode. You know, if you're going to put mana confluence in your deck, you should probably take a piece of paper and write off to the side like how much damage a game you're taking from it, and if that ended up being the reason you lost the game, and then reassessing mana confluence. So I think it's a great mana fixing tool, but it's hard to sometimes for a lot of players to assess whether or not that was what made you lose the game.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Mana Confluence is coming to Explorer after the complete set of Painlands did, which is kind of weird. It's backwards of what happened in Pioneer, where Mana Confluence was around before they had the complete set of 10 Painlands available. Decks played Mana Confluence because they didn't have those other 5 Painlands legal in the format. And I don't think I've seen anyone play it once, actually, since the other 5 were printed. Not against me, anyway.
Yeah, but right before the newest set of Painlands were printed, with that completed the set in Pioneer, I saw the 5-color Enigmatic Fires play like 1 copy of Mana Confluence. But now, since they're all back, the mana's a little bit better, and you don't have to play Mana Confluence anymore. So it's definitely a thing that's more of a liability if you're playing Constructed, and a very, very good card if you're playing Historic Brawl, or even just straight-up Commander. But we're talking about Explorer Anthology, so this will be on Arena. So I don't expect to see much Mana Confluence being played. Moving on to the next one is a staple card in white decks in Pioneer, especially the aggro decks, Brave the Elements. It's a 1 white instant, choose a color, white creatures you control gain protection from the chosen color until end of turn. This changes the game, actually, and makes the mono-white aggro deck and even red-white, I would say prowess, but more red-white heroic, very playable in Explorer now that we have Brave the Elements. I've definitely lost to this card not once, more than once, where they give their whole board protection from your blockers and attack you for game. So this is a very, very important card, Airball.
Yeah, it sure is. I've definitely gotten got by Brave the Elements several times. It's awesome in a format that's dominated by single target removal, like Pioneer is right now. And don't sleep on the other mode where you can just use it to push through lethal. This card is sick.
Yep, I have lost to this card. Not even in Pioneer. Not even Pioneer. I lost to it in Modern. It was a timing issue, and it ended up costing me the game, and I felt real silly. So make sure you pay attention to Brave the Elements. Additionally, if you're playing another color and you're doing a pump spell and you cast Brave the Elements in response to something, like say something's trying to bolt your thing, and in response you try and like, you know, Brave the Elements, and then they do another bolt, and then like you respond with like a pump spell, like be careful with that's probably not how it's going to work for it to fall off. But I have seen players who want to Brave the Elements and like they have like a good turn, like lethal lined up, and then your spell fizzles to pump your creature because Brave the Elements happens. So don't get got by your own, because that can also happen. So yes. Really powerful card. Plenty of people are going to get got. Your opponent's going to get got. You're going to get got by your own. It's a very fun card.
Yeah, I remember one time specifically the point that you made. I was playing against a green-white auras player, and they Brave the Elements on white and then lost their auras.
Mm-hmm. It's so good. It's so good.
Oops.
Yep. Whoops. I was like, yeah, you lose your auras. And they were like, oh. So yeah, that happened. So make sure you don't get got by that. But Brave the Elements, I think, really puts mono-white humans on the map, but maybe not until we get Thalio's Lieutenant, but it definitely makes mono-white aggro and Boros Heroic playable in Explorer. All right, moving on to the next one, and this one is Baroken. This one is
chaff.
You think it's chaff? You think the next one's chaff? Okay, let's do a vote. No. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, and this is the reason for the title of this one, Nykthos Not Nyxed, because Nykthos is here. For the longest time, Nykthos has not been an Explorer, and it's here, which means that Mono Green Devotion is now one of the best decks, if not the best deck in Explorer. I don't think it's the best deck. I think it's pretty much tied with Rakdos, but still, this quite literally jumps mono green devotion into one of the best decks in Explorer, Michael.
Yeah, good luck, gamers. You got to have it nice in Explorer where you didn't have to go against mono green, so have fun. Nykthos is literally a broken card because it breaks the game of Magic of producing way more mana than you should at a certain turn. So, yeah, this card, I don't need to talk about this card. This card is gonna make so much mana for the mono green players, and people are gonna be trying to be cute and be like, I had this deck, this mono black deck thought up, or I have this mono blue deck thought up, and I'm gonna use Nykthos, and it's gonna be great. And then you're gonna see the mono green opponent use it to its full utility and be like, what am I doing here? I need to pack it in. I need to go home. I need to reassess my life of why I was trying to make those not for green.
And for those of you at home, maybe you're a standard player who doesn't realize the power of Nykthos. You pay 2 mana and tap it and choose a color, and then add to your mana pool an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. So people will be using Cavalier of Thorns to get Nykthos onto the battlefield, and then using Nykthos for a ton of mana, and then casting another Cavalier of Thorns and getting another Nykthos. And Legend rules the Nykthos, and then you tap it again for a bunch of mana, and then you use Kiora to untap the Nykthos, and then tap it again for a bunch of mana, and then maybe you just cast your Teferi who slows the sunset and untap it again, and then you just find a whole bunch of ways to untap Nykthos, and all of a sudden you've made 80 mana in a turn. I'm not kidding. I've seen 92 mana in the same turn in a mono green deck. And
just concede.
Yeah, the game's over. Anyway, Airball, do you have anything to say about this card?
Yeah, this card kind of like puts me into a bit of a crisis. Like, Pioneer is my favorite format in Magic by a lot, right? And I was really excited when they added Explorer to Arena because it meant that we were going to get to Pioneer eventually over time. And every Explorer anthology so far, every card that they've printed into the format from Pioneer, I've been really excited about. Supreme Verdict, love it. Kalidas, great. Brave the Elephants, Brave the Elements. I want that one too. Brave the Elements, fantastic. And then I saw Nykthos, and I'm like, oh, that's going to be an Explorer now. Am I going to have as much fun in Explorer now that Nykthos is going to be here? And I think the answer is just no. This card is clearly the most powerful card in the entire format. It lets you do utterly busted, repetitive things. And the thing that bothers me most is that it exacerbates the existing play-draw issues with Magic. A Nykthos draw on the play is so much better and so much harder to interact with than a Nykthos draw on the draw. It leads to games that don't feel like games of Magic. Like there was nothing you could do, and that is the worst feeling in Magic to me, when it feels like my opponent just sort of goldfished and solitaire and I didn't get to do anything.
One thing about this that I like about this anthology is that they brought, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but they brought Nykthos into Explorer, but then they empowered the decks that already beat Mono Green in Pioneer. Bringing Brave the Elements. Mono White is pretty good against Mono Green. Mono Red, pretty good against Mono Green. Boros Prowess, Boros Heroic, pretty good against Mono Green. And those decks are playing Brave the Elements. So I like that there is the add Nykthos, but also add the card that's good against the Nykthos deck, even though the Nykthos deck is still better than those decks. But if I had to say anything positive about it, it would be I like the fact that Brave the Elements and some other cards we're about to go over are good already against Mono Green, and that's proven by statistics. All right, let's move on to the next one. It's Dispel. 1 mana instant, counter target instant spell. It is a CEDH and EDH staple, commander staple, Dispel, which is, I said we're going to talk about a little bit of Historic Brawl, but Dispel is probably going to be played in a competitive Historic Brawl if you wanted to play that. But I think I've seen Dispel like once in a Pioneer list, and it was like in a Hidden Strings deck. But do you see Dispel seeing play at all in Pioneer, or I mean in Explorer Anthology 2?
I don't. I think it's a straight up chaff card. There's other cards that I don't know. Like even Annul is better. I don't know if that's, what do you call this, playable in Pioneer, but I would put 2 copies of Annul in my deck before I put 1 Dispel in my deck.
Yeah, I mean, there's also like an offer you can't refuse and stuff too. Like there's cards that are like pretty good. There's just like Negate you could play. Airball, what do you think about the spell?
I think it's way too narrow. I don't think it'll see any play at all, and I think one of the main reasons is just because Mystical Dispute exists.
That too.
Most of the cards you would want a 1 mana counter spell for are to win counter wars, and Dispute just does that way better. I would never want to play any of these in my deck. I don't think.
Yeah, this is one of the things I say that Explorer Anthology 2 is there's a lot of cards that are really good and it will be good in Explorer / Pioneer. There's also cards that are just very popular cards and cards for Historic Brawl. Moving on to the next one is, I think, along with Mana Confluence, is a card that will make 5-color Enigmatic Fires better, and this was a card that they really needed. Nylea's Presence. It's 1 green for an aura, enchant land. When Nylea's Presence enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchant land is every basic land type in addition to its other types. So this is way better than the one we have in Explorer now, which doesn't actually change the land type to a basic land type, because Nylea's Presence turns on your Leyline Binding, whereas the other one that was played does not turn on your Leyline Binding. So very important that Nylea's Presence is in that deck, and it bumps up Enigmatic Fires a tier in Explorer, and it's probably going to be one of the best decks, at least a deck that you're going to have to worry about in Explorer Airball.
Yeah, you're right. Nylea's Presence is exactly what the Doctor ordered for Enigmatic Incarnation. Gives you a full domain just by being on the board. It's a sack enchantment for Enigmatic Incarnation itself, so you can put a 3-power creature into play. The 3-power creatures are the best fetch targets in on rate in the Enigmatic Incarnation deck, period. I think this card's awesome. I'm really glad to see it.
The thing that I think is the coolest is, like, if you're a creative deck builder, if you really like figuring out puzzles or like being able to put your personality or something into a deck, I think this is the one that is going to be the card out of anything on the list that's going to lend itself to the most creativity to anything else. This is one that if you're a creative deck builder, I think you folks out there are going to be very excited by this card.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to the next one that I think is just a very popular card, also a commander in Historic Brawl, but never ever played in Pioneer or Explorer. Sliver Hive Lord. This is a Wooburg 5-mana 5/5 legendary creature Sliver. Sliver creatures you control have indestructible. And this is just a commander, right?
Yep. I don't know what it's doing here. It's Sliver Snore Lord as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it's basically just a commander, right?
Yep, totally agree.
All right, moving on to Shaman of the Pack. 1 black and a green for a 3/2 elf shaman. When Shaman of the Pack enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. So, this makes Golgari elves more playable, but are Golgari elves really playable? I don't know. The only elves deck I saw that did okay in Pioneer was just mono green, so I don't know if you want to splash black for this. I mean, the black splash is probably not that big of a deal since we have Llanowar Waste now, and we just went over Mana Confluence if you wanted to play that. But Shaman of the Pack, if you want to play elves, it's here for you.
Yeah, it's a legal Magic card. It's a Coco hit. I wish it was like the red-black goblin that would let you do damage to any target to kind of like clear the way for your elves to get through. It doesn't. It just causes loss of life. I think that hurts it a lot. Maybe it makes the cut. I kind of doubt it.
All right, let's talk about the next one. It is an Eldrazi. We are getting Eldrazi's in Explorer, I think, for the first time. Matter Reshaper. It's 2 and a Wingding, which is like a colorless mana. I call it a Wingding. Eldrazi. And then it says, when Matter Reshaper dies, reveal the top card of your library. You may put that card onto the battlefield if it's a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less. Otherwise, put that card into your hand. And it's a 3/2. So it generally just puts a land on the battlefield, which is all I've seen this card do. But it can do a lot of other stuff too. It can put like any 3 mana or less permanent that you can think of that you might want to play. Fable the Mirror Breaker, Wedding Announcement, whatever you want to play. Or if you're playing other colors with this, you can put other Matter Reshapers on the battlefield. It's just played in your colorless Eldrazi deck, right? And there's a bunch more. There's a couple more Eldrazi's that we're going to go over. Then they did make it playable to have an Eldrazi tribal deck if you wanted to, and I think it's kind of important given the popularity of Eldrazi that it's just in Explorer in case people wanted to play it, even if it's not even good, right?
Listen, all you Eldrazi freaks out there. We know you're out there. You're sweating. You're just thinking about this Matter Reshaper. you're talking to all your friends like, bro, listen real quick, or like, hey yo chick, listen, we got this matter reshaper, it's gonna be awesome, I'm gonna put this Eldrazi deck together, it's gonna be phenomenal. Like, you're
Hey
seen,
babe,
okay?
hey babe, you want to see my matter reshaper?
Yeah, exactly. You are seen out there, okay? You do your Eldrazi thing on the ladder, like, have fun. Like, y'all got it. You got your wish.
I have played against exactly one match against Eldrazi Tribal in Pioneer, and it was not good at all. I was like, wow, you just played a 4-mana 4/4, or you just played a 3-mana 3/2. Like, that's not good.
They know. You don't need to tell them. Just let them live their dreams. Don't even just. This is for the most of people listening to this podcast. This is not for you. This is not for you. Just, all you Eldrazi people, just enjoy. I'm not going to say anything bad about it. You have your thing. Go Eldrazi out.
Yeah. You do your thing, Eldrazi people. And I think I might be an Eldrazi person. I literally cast Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger in Modern, so I guess I'm one of the Eldrazi people. I think. Does that make me an Eldrazi person? Casting like Ugin the Spirit Dragonist? Am I an Eldrazi person?
Ass airball.
That just makes you toxic. That's all.
I think I'm like half an Eldrazi person. I play Mono Green Tron in Modern. Anyway, moving on to the next one is Zulaport Cutthroat. 1 and a black for a 1/1 human rogue ally. Whenever Zulaport Cutthroat or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So, Mr. Rakdos Gang over here, your little Rakdos sacrifice shenanigans. I'm going to let you talk about the Zulaport Cutthroat and the little plans you have for this card.
I mean, I don't have that much plan. I don't really play Explorer like that, but like, if I was, like, I'm super interested in pairing this up with my cat, or with Priest or Forgotten Gods, or any of those type of things. Like, it's just Zulaport Cutthroat, phenomenal. And it's gonna get to see play in other things in Arena. So like, that's gonna be really interesting to see where it lends itself to in other places in Arena. So I think Zulaport Cutthroat, I've played lots of that in like Commander, and it's a wonderful card. It's a fair card because it is a 1/1 body that can die very easily. Like, you can just target it and it dies. But if you don't, you run away with the game. It's a solid, tight card in Sacrifice.
Yeah, I think this card probably doesn't make the cut in any Rakdos sack lists I've seen in Pioneer. It may get there in Explorer, which is just like a touch lower power level. And I like it because I think it's playable, even if it's not like the most optimal thing. It gives a little flavor to the formats. It gives something else to put in those flex spots. I don't think it makes it in Historic, just because Historic's power level is through the roof and this doesn't do enough. But I'm glad it's available to us.
Yeah, in Historic we have like Blood Artist, which is like way more powerful, right?
Yeah.
But Zulaport Cutthroat I actually have seen in a Pioneer deck. It's the Gilded Goose, and it plays like a bunch of mana dorks like Gilded Goose, Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, and it plays Zulaport Cutthroat and Priest of the Forgotten Gods, to where you can like turn 3 Bolus Citadel and then Woe Strider and combo off the top, and they play Zulaport Cutthroat in that deck, I believe. So that's the deck that I have seen it in. Not a popular deck at all, but it does complete that deck, I believe, which is worth noting. Moving on to the next one, and it's a super important card in Pioneer, and let's talk about it in Explorer, Rending Volley. This is a 1 red instant. Rending Volley can't be countered by spells or abilities. Rending Volley deals 4 damage to target white or blue creature. So they buffed Mono White, and then they put print Rending Volley. They buff Mono White, but they bring Nykthos. So I feel like they're doing this triangle thing where it's like, let's bring the best of Explorer best of Pioneer into Explorer Anthology 2. Because Rending Volley, if your deck is playing red, you're playing this card.
Yeah, at least in the 75, yeah. I think you're right about Mono White caring about this card, but I think where it really shines, and the biggest change it's going to make in the meta distribution, is with Mono Blue Spirits.
Yep.
Which right now is like one of the best decks in Historic or in Explorer, and most people I think would tell you that it is the best deck. It was well represented at the World Championship. It's an obnoxious deck to play against, and Rending Volley hoses it really hard. It's kind of the reason that Bant Spirits is more popular than Mono Blue Spirits in Pioneer right now. That's how big a deal we're talking about. This card is great. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael, I know you're probably thinking about playing this because even if you're in Pioneer playing like a Rakdos midrange, I know I have some copies of Rending Volley in my sideboard for in my Rakdos midrange deck against Mono Blue Spirits and for Bant Spirits and for Mono White and for Boros Heroic. I'm sure you're playing this card, right?
Yeah, definitely playing this card. Super good. I don't know if is Phoenix on the Explorer? Any Phoenix players out there?
There is a card that we haven't gone over yet that is really good in Phoenix, but I must give you a little bit of a spoiler that we're not getting any Delve cards in Explorer Anthology 2. So that means no Treasure Cruise, and we're also not getting Pieces of the Puzzle, which severely nerfs the power level of Phoenix. But Phoenix that exists in Pioneer right now does play Rending Volley.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a good card, especially if any of the blue decks are going to be playing Ledger Shredder. It's, it's a clean way to answer it, even if it's been pumped one time. And yeah, it gives Rakdos solid tools in their sideboards. Yeah, it's just like one of the most efficient things you can be doing for red removal in Rakdos or any sort of red sideboarding situation.
Yep. All right, we're moving on to another one, and this is actually just super scary to me. Ethereal Armor. It's a 1 white aura enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and has first strike. So this is like a Boggles card, but I'm super deathly afraid of Boggles. You slap this on a hexproof creature, and then a couple more auras on it, and now you're attacking with like a... You're getting hit by like a 9/9 hexproof vigilance first strike indestructible creature. And if you don't have like Liliana of the Veil or Invoke Despair or something to make them sacrifice the creature, you're just dead. Ethereal Armor is just a really scary card to me. Maybe it's because I play Rakdos midrange and I don't like playing against hexproof creatures. But this doesn't give hexproof, of course, but it does make the creature super large. Anything you guys have to say about Ethereal Armor? I think it does make a deck... It makes like the Light Pause, maybe green-white auras deck playable in Explorer now.
Yeah, it's kind of better all the glitters. 1 mana is a whole lot less than 2. It's an enchantment. It does what you want to be doing in those auras decks. I just don't feel like Boggles is super well positioned in a format that's dominated by single target removal, like super efficient removal, like Fatal Push, Go for the Throat, that kind of stuff. It doesn't really feel like Boggles is super well positioned against those kinds of cards. It also doesn't feel like it's great against decks that have a good number of a good board presence, a good number of jump blockers and that kind of stuff. And you do see that a little bit with Rakdos Sacrifice. You see it with bigger strategies that go way over the top, like Mono Green. I just don't feel like this card will by itself get there.
Well, no, I don't think it gets there by itself. But there is also there's an aura that they play. It's like a 2-mana green aura that gives trample, which is very relevant. And there's also a lot of white ones. There's like the Griff's Boon or something like that gives flying. So they definitely are prepared for decks like that. Not that it's a tier 1 deck or anything, but the people that really love auras, it's there for them.
Yeah. Sometimes you will get nut drawed by this thing and it will feel bad, but you need exactly the right distribution of creatures and auras and protection. And if you don't draw that in just the right quantities, or have your opponent stumble, then it's going to feel pretty mopey, I think.
Yeah, and that's why it's like not a super good deck, but if it's your cup of tea and it's your thing, then at least it's available for you. Okay.
However, in historic auras, this is pretty scary.
And this comes to historic then, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, every card on Arena that's not explicitly banned in historic is legal in historic.
This card in historic is just bananas. I mean, broken.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not broken, but it's just really good.
I mean, the one time I went and hit Mythic on Arena was historic auras. So, I mean, gamers, put on Ethereal Armor, go to war, get to Mythic.
Yeah, put on your armor and go LARP or something, with your armor.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next one. It's Eerie Interlude. 2 and a white for an instant. Exile any number of target creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So this, I think, is for a super go big high value historic brawl deck. Like you just play a whole bunch of blink cards and throw a Yorion in there or something, and then Eerie interlude your board in response to a a sweeper like a farewell or something, and then you Eerie interlude your entire board. It comes back and you get a whole bunch of triggers. But as far as Explorer is concerned, and even looking at the Pioneer meta, I don't think any decks are playing this. But is this chaff to you guys?
I don't think it's necessarily chaff. I think there's a place for it, and the place I'm saying it is for the same, people who are the creative brewers who want to also use like Nylea's presence and Era Interlude and like interlude and things like that. Like you want to do something creative or fun with ETB creatures or something to the fact, and like have all your fun, and like you might find a fun, powerful deck that you might be able to run through Explorer with for a while, while you're getting cheeky with it. So like I think it's kind of nice. It's like a breath of fresh air to those creative folks. But yeah, I don't necessarily think it's chaff, but it's not broken. I just think it's for those types.
I don't think this card's a joke. I think we can test with it and see if it fits as like a 1 or 2 of in the sideboard of like weenie decks, because historically their biggest weakness is board wipes, and this is one of the few types of effects that answers a board wipe. It is expensive, so it's expensive, but it protects your entire board, and that needs to compete with spells that protect individual creatures of yours that are much cheaper. And my instinct is that those will still be better answers to the board wipes in the format. But I'm interested to see what happens with this card. I think maybe 1 copy in the sideboard might be okay.
I think with like a mono white aggro deck, you want to be like more proactive with your interruption. Like you want to play like a Thalia and like Elite Spellbinder instead of holding up this 3-mana card. And especially even if like you want Thalia against the board wipe deck, and then that makes this 4 mana. So that makes it even worse. And also if your opponent has damage based sweepers, like say Burn Down the House or whatever does a lot of damage, Brave the Elements also just helps against that. Because it says that your creatures can't take damage from a certain spell. So I don't know if it sees play, but I wouldn't be surprised if I saw 1 on the sideboard.
What I was thinking was like green-white Coco decks, where you're already kind of used to holding up 4 mana.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Moving on to another one of you Eldrazi lover cards. It's Worldbreaker, 6 and a green, so 7 total mana for an Eldrazi. It's a 5/7. It has Devoid. When you cast Worldbreaker, exile target artifact, enchantment, or land. It has Reach. If it didn't have Reach, I'd be surprised. But you can pay 2 and a Wingding, sacrifice a land, return Worldbreaker from your graveyard to your hand. Did it mean to rhyme? I don't know. But Worldbreaker is just one of those cards where it's like you're playing mono green Tron in Modern, and you can cast this on turn 3 if you have a Chromatic Star with it. And I haven't seen this card anywhere else. But if you splash green in your Eldrazi deck, you have Worldbreaker to cast.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
I just hear like a cacophony of like slurping and whispers from all the Eldrazi players, just so happy about Worldbreaker. They're just like, I'm gonna put it in my graveyard, and then I'm gonna unearth it, and it's gonna come to the battlefield, and all my enemies will be in awe, and I will kill them. I'm just like, all right, unlicensed Hearst. Here you go. But like, hey, you Eldrazi people, just go wild. That's all I gotta say.
Listen, they're a different breed, okay? They're a different breed. Let them have their Worldbreaker.
I know they're a different breed. They can have it.
No shame against the breed, though. It's a good breed. No, it's just different breed. Airball, what do you think about Worldbreaker? Have you cast this before?
I did not know this card existed until now.
Oh my god!
Amazing.
It is a cast trigger. I must say I have cast some Worldbreakers in my deck, playing mono green Tron in Modern, because it exiles lands in the mirror match. It's actually a good tech. It exiles lands. Your opponent Blood Moons you. You have a forest, and you can exile the Blood Moon. It's real. It's real. I'm not kidding.
Oh,
I played it in my sideboard.
Let's get you to bed, Grandpa.
Yeah, you just like or a kid in the playground.
I'm not kidding,
real.
I'm not kidding. This does exile lands in the mirror match and exiles Blood Moon when you have a green source. It's real.
Okay, I know it's real. I know I say it's not real. It's real.
All right. I'm laughing, but it's not because it's not real. Okay, it's real. Moving on. Clever impersonator. It's a 2 and double blue 0/0 shapeshifter. Hey, you stop laughing. You may have clever impersonator enter the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. So when I see this card, I'm like, okay, that's definitely a Historic Brawl. But also, it got my companion ears tingling because you know what else gets to play this card? It's an even card. Garuda. It's more Garuda fodder to mill this card and bring it back and copy Garuda and keep. So you can definitely do that in Historic Brawl. I don't see this being played anywhere else.
Don't we already have like a 4-mana card that does exactly this from Capenna?
Yes.
Am I crazy?
We have it from Capenna, and we also have one from More of the Spark. I forgot Spark Double. So we have like a lot of 4-mana ones.
And there's also the one from Zendikar, which can be a land or not a land, which also copies a thing too, right?
Is that even also
Glasspool Mimic?
Yeah, Glasspool's odd.
3.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying it was a similar type of effect. I didn't think about the mana cost.
Yeah, so we get more copies of cards. Not only the new Capenna one, but we get Clever Impersonators too. So if you want to play Garuda and you like copying your Garuda a bunch of times and mill out your deck and play a Thassa's Oracle, then you go do that. But I don't see it playable in Explorer.
Why are you hating on? Actually, hold up, hold the phone. Don't hate up on Garuda players. They're basically,
don't
the
say
same
it.
thing as
God,
Eldrazi players. It's the same people. What are you talking? They all got tentacles. It's like it's all. What do you? Don't yuck. They're yum.
I'm not.
You're eating from the same plate.
It's my own yum. It's my own yum. I've cast Worldbreaker in my life. Neither of you have.
Okay.
You like your tentacles, do you, James?
I like my tentacles. Leave my tentacles alone.
Okay.
Right. I can't.
I can't. We're gonna move on to a card that is one or two of in mono white aggro decks in Pioneer, coming to Explorer, Soldier of the Pantheon. It's a 1-mana, 1 white, 2/1 human soldier, protection from multicolored. It also says whenever an opponent casts a multicolored spell, you gain a life. So I have seen this in mono white aggro. Have you played against this card, Airball?
I did, like, back in the day. Like, I feel like a few sets ago, I played against Soldier of the Pantheon, and I had to read it on Moto, and then I said, oh, okay, I don't care. And then I killed them. Like, this card did not impress me at all. Am I missing something here? It's a 2/1 for 1. It passes the Savannah Lion test. But does anything else matter on this card?
I mean, I don't even know what could be multicolored that could even kill this. Like, everything's monocolored that can kill this. Fatal Push is monocolored. Just literally anything that's a removal spell is monocolored, besides Dreadbore, I guess. And actually today I was playtesting Pioneer, and I cut all Dreadbores out of my 75. It was just bad. But I don't know what people's hang-up is with Dreadbore being better than the instant speed removal spells, but whatever. I can go on that rant forever. But Soldier of the Pantheon, moral of the story is everything that would deal with this is already single colored. So I don't even know what protection from multicolored does. I guess it can attack through a whole board of colored cards, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's it. But yeah, our decks aren't normally, especially in Pioneer where things are like efficient and you don't want to be hung up by like mana color stuff. Like, I don't know what it is for either. Like, cool, it dodges Drown the Lock. Like, that's like and no deck is playing like Drown the Lock or Dreadbore like some decks are playing Dreadbore, but like, yes, I don't know what it's dodging. It's trying to dodge stuff that isn't worth dodging.
Here's the card it dodges. The best card that it dodges is Blood Tithe Harvester. Like, that's it, I think.
Yeah.
Because Blood Tithe Harvester can't target it, give it -2/-2, and it can attack through Blood Tithe. Sure.
All right. Yeah.
Moving on to another Eldrazi. Kozilek, the Great Distortion. This is 8 and double wingding for 10 mana. It's a 10 mana 12/12. It's a legendary creature Eldrazi. When you cast Kozilek the Great Distortion, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So draw up to 7. With Menace. Why 12 needs Menace anyway, I don't even know. Discard a card with converted mana cost X. Counter target spell with converted mana cost X. I have only seen this card as a colorless commander. You know what I'm going to say? It's Historic Brawl.
Okay, you're not going to try and cast this in
I'm not going to
Explorer?
cast this. There's no
Is it
Tron
a good
lands.
commander? It has no color. Like, are you going to play a colorless commander?
Yes, you can play a colorless
I guess
commander.
you can. I know you can, but it's like the Jurassic Park thing. You spend so long thinking about whether or not you could that you didn't think about whether you should. Like,
Yeah.
it just seems terrible.
So, amazing thing that I heard from another podcast where it was a quote from Li Shi, how do I say
Li
his name?
Shitian.
Yeah.
Li Shitian. He's like, there are 5 colors in Magic, and they each do very powerful things, and yet you choose to play none of them. And so, you know what, Eldrazi, commander dudes and people and folks, do the colorless thing. That's great. If you end up, casting one of these in Explorer, screenshot it, send it to us. We'll have a good time.
Listen, that's actually a good test. Please do that. Please, I'm looking at the camera right now. Do that, please. I will love you. But there's also a lot of good colorless cards. I have to call them out. Mystic Forge, Karn Great Creator, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, Ugin the Ineffable. There's a lot of really good mana rocks that also draw cards and also attack your opponent. You can build a really good colorless deck. I'm not going to be doing it, okay? But you could if you're listening to this. I'm advocating for it, but I personally will not be doing this. But you can vomit your whole hand on the battlefield in mana rocks, and then cast your Kozilek, and it's a cast trigger to draw up to 7 cards. Who doesn't want to do that? I want to do that. I'm not going to, but I want to. It's a good idea. I like the idea of it. Anyway, moving on from Kozilek, because we talked a long time about it already. Another Eldrazi. Oh my goodness, is this an Eldrazi show or what? Eldrazi Displacer. It's 2 and a white for a 3/3 Eldrazi with void. 2 and a wingding. Exile another target creature, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. You can do this to your opponent's creatures. You can blink your opponent's tokens. You can blink your own stuff and return tapped. I have seen this card in 5 color enigmatic fires to the point where they said it was 6 colors because wingding, I guess, is another color. It's not really, but you do actually have to use colorless mana and not colored mana to use this ability. But I have seen Eldrazi Displacer flicker Agent of Treachery. I've seen it flicker Titan of Industry. I've seen it flicker, all these cards that Enigmatic Fires plays, and even flickers my favorite bull, Siege Rhino. So what do we think about Eldrazi Displacer in Explorer now?
It's not very good.
It's played. It's
3 mana for. It's played where?
Played in Enigmatic Fires. Don't give me that face.
I mean, I guess. I'm giving you that face. Like this just doesn't impress me. This seems super inefficient and just not what I want to be doing in that deck. I don't think. 3 mana to get it into play, and then 3 mana to activate it, and then get blown out by removal spells that dominate the format.
No, you just use it in response to the removal spells, so your opponent can never cast the removal spell. So if I target it, they're just going to blink it.
I understand how Magic works, but I don't feel like this is efficient enough. To have to holding up 3 mana to blank your opponent's removal spell is a pretty extreme cost, and I don't think I ever want to be doing that. I think I want to be more proactive in playing out to the board. But I don't know. If you say it's played, then I believe you, but I haven't seen a whole lot of it.
I have a caveat for you. Enigmatic Fires plays Fires of Invention, right? This is why they play it.
Yeah.
You don't use any of your mana, and then you just use it all on this.
I get that.
Michael, what do you think? It's an Eldrazi.
Yeah, Eldrazi displacing in my deck.
It's
not in my deck.
God.
That's where it belongs. It's
not in your deck. It's displaced from your deck.
Exactly.
No, that was a good dad joke. Okay, you don't give a lot of them, but when you do, they're funny. I must say,
You're
this is actually the most playable Eldrazi in Pioneer right now. It's the most played one.
Don't let one James. Don't let one James lie to you, Eldrazi lovers. They're
I'm not
all very
lying.
playable. They're all playable. They're all
It's
wonderful.
playable.
Play them.
Please take to the Explorer ladder with your Eldrazi decks on day one, and like all of you do it. I would love it. I could use the easier trip to Mythic. Honestly.
Oh my gosh. Okay, now you have to prove him wrong. Prove him wrong. Make his trip to Mythic so hard. And blink with Eldrazi display. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. It's for Is It Phoenix, which is the only deck I think I've seen play this. Fiery Impulse. It's a 1 red instant. It deals 2 damage to target creature. It has Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, Fiery Impulse deals 3 damage to that creature instead. So it's a lightning bolt. No, it's basically an instant speed strangle, if you will, in Explorer. But since we're not getting all the other cards for Is It Phoenix, does this make Is It Phoenix that much better?
I think Fiery Impulse is a really important card for Phoenix in Pioneer because it's one of the best answers in the format to Greasefang. Otherwise, Is It Phoenix can kind of get overrun by a good Greasefang draw on the play, but Fiery Impulse is just a 1-mana answer to the creature, and it's not very hard at all to get 2 instants or sorceries in your graveyard.
Yeah, so it's also actually, you know what? I've seen this card played in like Is It and Jeskai creativity decks as well that like to fill their graveyard and discard cards with some discard outlet cards like Big Score and things like that. I've seen play Fiery Impulse. Michael, what do you think of this card? You playing it?
I agree. I mean, personally, no. I mean, if more of the Phoenix pieces show up on Explorer, I might jam Explorer or Phoenix. Like, I'm a big Rakdos player, but like if I was gonna go to one of the events that happened recently, like the RC or something like that, like Phoenix is probably like the secondary deck I would play in Pioneer. So giving Phoenix more tools is kind of cool. And you might see some other decks figure out a way to leverage it. Like I said, it's another deck that it might be a card that like lends itself to creative folks on the ladder. Maybe someone wants to be cheeky and build like a young pyromancer and third
Path Iconoclast.
Third Path Iconoclast. Like maybe someone wants to do a cheeky deck, something like that, and like that slots in with this. So like I think it's just it's a fun thing for Is It mages out there. So I'm curious to see if people are gonna try and brew some stuff up while having one of these be one of the cards that they slot in.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Now we gotta move on to the mono red lovers, which are just the opposite side of the spectrum from the Eldrazi lovers. But it's Eidolon of the Great Revel. Double red for a 2/2 enchantment creature spirit. Whenever a player casts a spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, Eidolon of the Great Revel deals 2 damage to that player. This is a modern staple in Burn, and it is a Pioneer staple in mono red, whether it's red deck wins or just straight up Burn. You're playing Eidolon. Not really much to say about this card other than it does a massive amount of damage, right?
Oh yeah, and like pairing this with Kumano faces Kakazan.
Yep.
Oh my god, because it's like you play Kumano on turn 1, turn 2, this thing comes in as a 3/3. Then you see your opponent start sweating because they're like, I had 2 damage to remove that thing. Now I have not the 2 damage to remove this thing. And then they end up taking like 6 to 8 damage in a turn throughout the game from Eidolon of the Great Revel. So it's a magnificent pairing of Eidolon of the Great Revel and Kumano faces Kakazan.
Yeah, it's one of those cards where it's like you don't want to get burned out by the burn deck, but in order to remove the burn card, you have to get burned, like most of the time. So it's just like you just gotta eat it, right, Airball?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad this card is coming because I think formats are better when mono red is good, and this is just a pretty huge upgrade on the 2-drop slot on the mono red decks that exist in Explorer right now. And those mono red decks keep the format honest when they're good. I also kind of like the symmetric effect You don't see that a whole lot with modern Magic cards anymore, but this card hits you too when you play it. And if you're playing Modern Burn, or if you're playing Pioneer Burn, you're probably going to hurt yourself almost as much as you're hurting your opponent. Your opponent is hurting themselves by casting their removal spells. This makes the mirror match very, very difficult in a way that I am here for.
I don't want to play a mirror match with Eidolon of the Great Revel. That's why I cast Worldbreaker. Anyway, let's move on to Courser of Crufix. This can help you against Eidolon of the Great Revel. 1 in double green for a 2/4 Centaur. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library if it's a land. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. So, ever since like 3 years ago, I haven't seen Courser Crufix being played in Pioneer. But maybe it's because there's another card that's played that is just strictly better than Courser Crufix, I think. But this has its uses, especially if you need the life gain in a deck, and it's also a 2/4. 4 toughness is a pretty big deal right now in Explorer, so especially because it blocks Graveyard Trespasser and things like that. So, is Courser of Crufix playable in Explorer right now, given that it is a slightly lower power level than Pioneer?
It might be. It might be. Yeah, I think it could see some play, especially like obviously in the first couple of weeks when this is released to the client on Arena. I think people are going to try and build maybe some rampy decks. I don't know. Are people able to play Lotus Field on Explorer or no?
No, you can't play. You can't play an Explorer even past this anthology because Hidden Strings isn't isn't in this anthology. I assume when we do an Explorer Anthology 3, they might bring that into the format. But isn't Augur of Autumn just better than Courser of Crufix, right? But I don't see this. I don't see this seeing any play, right, Airball?
I think you're right. I think the card is pretty much just a 2/4 for 3, because it doesn't let you make an extra land drop for your turn, right? It just lets you play a land off the top of your deck, which is going to happen like 45% of the time. It's like drawing a card, but it's like drawing the worst card in your deck most of that time. I think for 3 mana, you really need to do better.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to a card that makes Abzan Greasefang much better. Satyr Wayfinder. You no longer have to play Mulch or anything like that anymore. You can play a 2-mana 1/1 Satyr that when it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You can put a land from among them in your hand, and then put the rest into your graveyard. This card is a 4-of staple in every deck, every Abzan Greasefang deck, and it makes Abzan Greasefang rise even further to the top of the meta and makes it tier 1, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. That's easy.
Now, okay, I agree with you. I think Satyr Wayfinder is a great card. I think it's really good in Greasefang. It's a Brewer's Paradise card. It lets you do all sorts of things that Brewers love to do. Fill your graveyard, put a 1/1 in play cheaply, find a combo piece in the top of your library. It's an awesome card. Whether it makes Greasefang tier 1, I'm going to hold my breath on that because I need to see how many copies of Karn are going to be cast on turn 3 with the printing with Nykthos coming to the format. Because I think that has been what has been holding Greasefang back in Pioneer that did not exist until the printing of Nykthos in Explorer. So I really want to see how many copies of Karn are floating around after this comes out.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think as long as it doesn't, there's no turn 3 Karn. Turn 3 Karn on the play is what will beat Greasefang. If Greasefang's on the play, Greasefang definitely wins. But if Greasefang's on the draw with a turn 3 Karn, then it's not good enough. But we'll see how it goes. We already know how good Mono Green make those in the format, so that is a deck that will keep Greasefang in check. But Satyr Wayfinder is a very good upgrade. All right, we're not wasting any time here. We're moving on to the next one. You heard that? It's waste. It's waste. Oh my gosh, what a joke. Anyway, it's just a basic land, but it doesn't actually have a basic land type. Oh, please. If you're watching this from YouTube, just look at their faces. They're the best. This is a basic land, doesn't count as basic land type. Also can't get it from a card like Boseiju, because Boseiju says land with a basic land type. But it's wastes, which also counts for Wingding mana. there's not much more to say about it. It's a basic land. I'm glad it's here, especially for my cool Eldrazi.
Yep, that's for there's the Eldrazi lovers. I believe they probably have like a poster of Waste in their room. That's what I think about when I see Waste.
Not just all the empty Coke cans and everything on the desk and stuff. That's the waste that you're talking about, right? And that's trash can over there.
Please, it's Mountain Dew.
Yeah, you're right.
We all know it's Mountain Dew.
You're right, it is Mountain Dew. You're not wrong. Anyway, not much to say about that. Let's not waste anybody's time here. Let's go on to the next one. It's a Mutavault. This card is very good. It's a land. It adds a colorless mana to your mana pool, so you guessed it, Eldrazi mana. You can pay 1 mana. Mutavault becomes a 2/2 creature with all creature types until end of turn. It's still a land. So this enhances a bunch of different archetypes. It enhances vampires, zombies. This card is a 4 of in zombies decks, I believe, or 3 of. A lot of tribal archetypes that play Mutavault in. Also, just a really good aggressive land to attack with. It's played in mono white. A lot of different decks play this. I think this is this is definitely a strict upgrade to a lot of other creature lands we have. But any decks come to mind, Airball, that Mutavault is played in that I didn't mention already?
Oh god, mono red. Like,
oh yeah, mono red.
Monocolor aggressive decks really, really love these colorless cheap man lands to activate. Mutavault is probably the best man land in the format, in my opinion, just because it's so cheap to activate. The cost of playing it is so low, and it does have the tribal synergies you're talking about.
Yeah, to add on to what Airball said, I think Mutavault, as far as you playing against Mutavault or the opponent of a Mutavault, it is a skill testing card. It really pushes the skill testing on you about how you think about combat, like beginning of combat, and also tribal effects, because you can kind of get got sometimes. You forget, like, oh, I have a clean attack in, or the board state looks really good, or I'm ahead right now, and then they go and activate Mutavault for 1 because you forgot that can be a thing. They can so they do that, and sometimes they can use, right, you can use the mana to activate itself even though it'd be tapped. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so like they can do that, and sometimes something will say like, oh, sacrifice a merfolk, or if something happens with a creature showing up or something or the other sort, it triggers. The way it can like trigger things or make things happen that you did not expect, it really puts the onus on your opponent or yourself, if you're going against this, to really pay attention to Mutavault. It's a card that has gotten me so many times, and I do not, there's no shame in admitting that, because it's something I still have to always learn about Mutavault. There's just so much ways that your opponent can use it. And usually when you use Mutavault, you don't have to think as hard, because it's just kind of part of the repertoire of your deck of what you're doing. But like, if you're ever playing against a Mutavault, just keep looking at that card, keep highlighting that card, and looking at the board state that your opponent is making, because it's just really easy to get got by Mutavault.
Right.
Yeah, I think I should point out that like a lot of the power of Mutavault comes from the low opportunity cost of activating it. So like, usually when you're activating manlands that exist in the format in Explorer right now, you're talking about Den of the Bugbear, Hive of the Eye Tyrant. Those cost 4 mana to activate, and then cost another effective mana because you're tapping them to attack. So if you do that and your opponent has instant speed removal, then you've wasted your entire turn and stone range yourself. Mutavault doesn't really have that problem. You're activating 1 mana and spending a total of 2 to attack with it. If your opponent has instant speed removal, oftentimes that's not so bad, because you can still make another play to the board while your opponent had to waste their removal spell on your land.
Right. Another deck that I've seen utilize Mutavault at 4 copies, the Gruul Vehicles deck, which has risen in popularity a lot, and I believe actually had a above 65% win rate in the last Explorer stats that I saw, which was incredible. People are sleeping on that deck, and it plays a lot of copies of Sky Sovereign Console Flagship, and it does play 4 copies of Mutavault. Just a really good aggressive land, and shines in aggressive mid-range decks and aggressive. All right, moving on to the last Eldrazi. There's so many of these. I didn't realize there were so many Eldrazi's, but here we are. Probably the best one so far. Thought Not Seer. 3 and a Wingding for an Eldrazi. When Thought Not Seer enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it and exile that card permanently. When Thought Not Seer leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. So they never get that exiled card back like you're used to seeing in like a detention sphere type effect. But it does more of like the Skyclave apparition type of thing. Like it's gone forever, and they get a little bit of something when this. It's a 4-mana 4/4 Eldrazi. So this is definitely played in mono green Tron in Modern, and played in Eldrazi decks in Modern as well. But one thing that Pioneer doesn't have and Explorer won't have that Modern has is Eldrazi Temple, which gives 2 extra mana if you're casting an Eldrazi or Eldrazi ability. And since you don't have that land, it's very difficult to make these Eldrazi's work because they're a little bit overstated for being a 4/4. But this is the most popular Eldrazi.
You know, there's definitely people who are probably listening to the podcast who are very nostalgic about Thought Not Seer. So, you know, I think it's going to serve that purpose well. But at the same time, I still think like Eldrazi definitely needs more tools if it's going to be seriously played. But people are going to play it and they're going to have fun. And that's great.
All right, moving on to the last one. It is Reflector Mage. This one's an awesome card. 1 white and a blue for a 2/3 human wizard. When Reflector Mage enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. So I have seen this in anywhere from humans decks, 5-color humans, 4-color humans, even like mono white humans splashing this. I've seen it in like Bant, even Bant spirits I've seen play this, even though it's not a spirit. It's just a very powerful effect to have, and honestly one that you probably never want to play against because you just don't get to cast the spell again. Airball, have you played with this card or against it? What are your feelings on Reflector Mage or now?
I haven't seen a whole lot of it either way. I did have it played against me when I was playing Yorion, and my opponent bounced my Yorion, and I read the first half of the card, bounced the creature to its owner's hand. I'm like, you just bounced my Yorion, you're insane. And then my turn came around, and I'm like, why can't I play it?
Yep.
And then I had to read the card, and that's my least favorite thing to do in Magic. Having to read the card. It makes me feel dumb. But I think it's a target for the Enigmatic Fires deck. I think that it's a reasonable tempo card as well in like a blue-white aggressive deck as well, if one exists, which I don't think it does in Explorer right now. And it's also just like an iconic Magic card that I'm glad exists in the format. I'm glad people have access to play with this card.
Yeah, agreed with everything Airball said. And, you know, one thing in this anthology that it pairs well with is the eerie interlude. Like if you end up, you know, exiling, you know, your Reflector Mage and it comes back, you can like maybe, you know, bounce 1 or 2 things in one turn if you had the 6 mana to pull this off. And that's pretty powerful of like stun locking your opponent for playing 2 creatures. It's just, and maybe that's like the only 2 creatures they have in their hand and like maybe a land card. So like now they really have nothing to do. So I think it's gonna do some fun, powerful things, and I don't know. I just think it's a really interesting card, and I've never had to play against one, or I never played one either. But I'm definitely familiar with how it feels. Like I've watched content of how locky it could feel. It doesn't feel great.
Yeah, for sure. It does really feel like a lock. All right. Any final words on how you feel about the Explorer Anthology as a whole? Is there any cards you think that we left out? Is there any any decks archetypes that you think that they put too many cards in or something? What are your final takeaways, Airball, of the Explorer Anthology 2?
Nykthos isn't getting banned anytime soon. I think that's what we can infer from this. I think most of us already probably suspected that it was the promo card for the RCQs. Wizards really didn't want to ban it, didn't think it was a problem. But now we know that they had a choice about which cards to put into Explorer. They have finite amount of time and dev hours with which to do that, and they chose to put Nykthos in ahead of some other card that would have, in theory, stuck around for the rest of Explorer's life on the client.
Treasure Cruise.
They think Nykthos is going to stick around. So get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, Nykthos is here to stay. I don't really. It's it's just kind of one of those things where it's just like rock paper scissors kind of thing of like there's the mono green decks, in Pioneer. There's the Green Devotion decks in Pioneer. There's the Rakdos decks, and there's Phoenix, and then there's a couple other things. And I feel like the faster they can get to kind of enabling some of the other stuff for to go against mono green devotion, I think that's gonna be wise. But I think we might see like an uptick a lot in Explorer being played with lots of people playing mono green, and then I'm concerned about like the mono green, the health of the format out of Explorer, because people might get disinterested about trying to battle mono green decks all the time because what they're doing is just pretty unfair. But the winners of this card dump is essentially red decks, white decks, well, mono red decks like the burn stuff, white decks, and then mono green. I think is kind of like the big takeaway of the winners of this card dump.
Yeah, I mean, I like that there's cards for Historic Brawl for those who play Historic Brawl. I like the fact that there's certain tribal things that they've clearly emphasized, like Eldrazi's, and there's a Mutavault in here. I like the fact that they, like, well, I'll say once again, that they put Nykthos in the format, realize that they're going to have to put decks in that also beat mono green, so Eidolon of the Great Revel and Brave the Elements come in. So I like the fact that they realized that and then made decks stronger that beat mono green. So we will see how the Explorer meta shapes up after this, and just expect to play against a lot of mono green if you do play Explorer now. All right, that's it for us. Thank you so much to everyone for listening, and especially those who made it this far. Make sure to give us a follow to see our next episodes. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Nuts and Bolts Pod, and we will see you in the top 8.
See you guys.
See you, folks.